Welcome to the American Journal of Psychiatry Residence Journal podcast. I'm your host, Neil Christopher, and today I'm with Dr. Melissa Perot. She is my Associate Program Director at Loma Linda University Health Psychiatry Residency. Dr. Perot, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm the clerkship director for the third year clerkship at the School of Medicine, and I'm also the associate psychiatry residency training director for our residency here at Loma Linda.
Where did you go to medical school?
Went to medical school at Loma Linda, went to residency at Loma Linda, and I've been an attending at Loma Linda for 10 years, so I think I'm stuck here.
You know where all the bodies are buried.
Pretty much.
Our topic of conversation for today is something that is of extreme interest to psychiatry residents this time of year, and that is the Ninja Guide to the PRITE. I wanted to interview you to get a little bit behind the scenes of the Ninja Guide because it is one of the most popular resources in psychiatry training. And everywhere I go to a conference, someone asks me about it. When's it coming out? When's it going to be released? What is the Ninja Guide, and how did you come up with this idea and the name?
When I was a third-year resident, I was getting pretty burned out and felt pretty disengaged from my training. And I had two third-year medical students rotating with me at our Veterans Hospital. And we had some downtime, and they were asking for help studying for their NBME, particularly in the area of psychopharmacology. And they wanted to know what is the best resource for us to learn about psychopharmacology so that we can do well on our exam. And we were talking about different source books and different resources. And ultimately, they said, no, is there just one place where you can learn everything you need to know about psychopharmacology for medical students, like a samurai handbook of all things psychopharm? And I looked at the kid and I'm like, I have no idea the words that are coming out of your mouth or what any of that means. I looked at them, I said, a samurai handbook of psychopharm. No, there's nothing that I can think of one thing for medical students that will just do that in a short place. Or you're talking about something like a ninja's guide. And they're like, yeah, a ninja guide. And I'm like, okay, I can make that.
And how long was it before you created the first version?
Interestingly, actually, it began as a series of handouts that I created for medical students. It wasn't even supposed to be a PRITE guide to begin with. And so it began as the Ninja's Guide to Psychopharmacology. And there was a section there about different medications and different dosing. And it was written from the perspective of what would be important or interesting to a medical student. But it involved some of the history of the drugs and where they came from and things like that. And over time, the handouts continued to grow as I continued to add more sections as far as psychopharm went. And I began to see that the students liked using it and it was helpful for them. And they started asking for handouts on Erikson versus Freud and about developmental stages and common things that they were still seeing on the NBME. And so I made another guide that was the Ninja's Guide to Freud and other important stuff. And I continued to make these guides when over time I had like 5 or 6 different guides and began to realize these things that I'm giving to these students could also be used to prepare for PRITE, because PRITE had a lot of the same materials on it. And I thought, I'm going to be a 4th year soon, and these guides have been pretty fun. And all of a sudden I look back and it'd been 5 months. I was making all these guides. I loved what I was doing. I was teaching students. I felt engaged. I felt alive. I felt passionate about psych, about teaching. And I was like not burned out for the first time in residency. And so I went into my chief residency year and was very much like, I want to do more teaching. I want to do more guides. And I want to see if I can apply this to an audience more like myself.
So it really didn't start out to be about the PRITE at all. It was simply, we need a resource that's consolidated for education, particularly for medical students. What is the vision for it going forward?
Going forward, I think a few years ago, we began to see that the more we add to the content of it, the more it becomes useful for board prep in addition to just preparation for PRITE exam. I think most of the studies I've seen or the data I've seen shows that how you do on the PRITE, at least to a degree, does correlate with how you do on the boards. And if you do poorly on the PRITE, the likelihood that you're going to rock the boards is definitely a lot lower.
As you've updated this year to year. You've had teams of residents and students help you. What's been the most interesting thing that you've seen come out of the process of creating and releasing it each year?
So when we were about to create the very first guide, it occurred to us that the PRITE itself was a great place to start. And so we went and started to collect old versions of the PRITE to review the questions and to review the content. And we were able to get together like 10 years of PRITE exams and be able to track over time what kinds of questions were asked, what kind of questions no longer seemed relevant over the course of time. And every PRITE exam is 2 booklets of 150 questions. So we had 3,000 questions in front of us, and a lot of it was just cataloging and looking at what are areas that this test that's made by a private entity, what are areas that this entity feels are important to be knowledge bases in residency, and how does that shape how we're learning? And so for us, it was very much, how can we get these questions into an order that makes sense to us to learn rather than just looking at old PRITE tests? And how can we be able to come up with questions that either summarize what the PRITE's looking at or create questions of our own that are similar to what the PRITE's looking at, to come up with question and content sections, because so much of the PRITE is not just question answer, but is looking at certain areas of development academically. And so neurology and clinical practice of medicine, they're all broken into subsections. And so it was getting a crew together to begin to assimilate that into one place. And there's no way one person could have done that at the beginning.
It does seem to be a very big project. And being a part of this residency program, I've gotten to see some of those sessions. It's almost like a club.
Okay. And that is clinical psychiatry,
All right.
and epidemiology.
Oh, and epidemiology. Oh, it's that's the source.
Of people who get together to help go through materials and prepare and make edits to the guide each year. It seems like you've learned a lot, though, probably about education and planning for these kinds of standardized tests. What can you tell residents that you've learned over the years that would be good for psychiatry residents all over the nation to hear?
I think that the way our residents are tested is important. I think the trends that are present in testing is important. When I took the boards, now I'm getting ready to do my maintenance of certification, so I took it 10 years ago. When I took the boards, there were already questions there about genes and genetic testing associated with psychiatry. And if you track what the PRITE has done over time, even in creating subsections of the PRITE, where more of it is looking at neuroscience and bioavailability and receptor affinity, we can see that our field is changing in ways that are really exciting. And as an educator, it's been difficult because in the last 3 or 4 years, the PRITE has become a lot more focused on small molecular things compared to some of the larger big picture things I was accustomed to. And so having a question asking which of the serotonin receptors is ionotropic, and I was like, that's basic science stuff I haven't even read or looked at in 8 or 10 years, and realizing I have to re-educate myself on all of this. It was really helpful, and it was exciting. It was awful, and it was great at the same time, because it was like, where is this exam going? And boards has been going in the exact same direction for 10 years, looking at more about sleep medicine and more about molecular basis of practice. And PRITE and the boards have been doing this beautiful little parallel process, showing us in some ways where we're going as a field, matching the research that's being done, that maybe even I'm not reading all of the current research, and yet based on where these exams are going, I know where our field is going, and it makes me so excited. It makes me scared because I have to keep learning really hard stuff about genes and molecules and receptors that I never realized in this field I was going to need to do when I got really good at Ericksonian things. And yet at the same time, I see where it's going. I'm like, pretty soon we're talking about functional MRI for the things that we're doing. Pretty soon we're talking about genetic testing to actually identify medications that are going to be effective, as opposed to just medications that are not going to be tolerated.
It's pretty neat that what became a passion of yours to teach medical students kind of morphed into keeping yourself up to date. And that's become a resource for the rest of us. I know for me, coming on as a PGY1, it seems like our residency and service training exam is a little early. Maybe it's not. Maybe they're all this early. I don't know what other specialties do, but I know I was shocked to find out it was so early. And I thought, how in the world am I going to prepare? And of course, I happen to match at the program that has the PRITE itself. So I felt very fortunate to benefit. And I know many of our listeners do as well. This year, you've done some additional updates. I know you worked really hard on one section in particular. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. This year we added like 34 pages of new content on maternal fetal medicine. And I'm really, really excited about this, not because it's something that gets people particularly ready for PRITE. And I think that that is part of us starting to deviate from solely teaching to the test, solely looking at what are the questions, how do we make a person be able to memorize the topics and the answers needed, and more looking at where are areas in our field that we have deficits in knowledge. And I think maternal fetal medicine has amazing, cool data coming out of that field constantly. I mean, the last 3-4 years, the data looking at functional MRI in infants, looking at brain development in a fetus. I mean, we can do things now that 10 years ago could not be done in research. And so the effects of our medicine on the developing fetus is a huge area of study and a huge area that we all need to know about. And yet oftentimes it's not highlighted as much within curriculum as it could be. And so for me, adding that chapter, while it may only be represented by 8 PRITE questions on both booklets every year, it's something that I think as a group we can learn a lot more about. And I had some very, very talented medical students and residents working together to compile this information. I helped edit, I helped to add some vignettes, but a lot of it is their work.
Are there any other big trends that you've noticed with PRITE or that you've heard about our board testing over the years that we need to be aware of as residents?
Pretty much just what I've mentioned as far as more of the neuroscience. I mean, the PRITE has more pictures of the brain and neuroanatomy than it's had in the past. It's asking more about things at the molecular basis than it ever has. And actually, interestingly, there's a lot more questions now on system-based medicine, case management, what are the roles of the various members of the team, looking at how we practice as a team in our field across the board, which I think is great and useful and is important for residents to be aware of because that's the world that we're practicing in. Unfortunately, it's very hard to build any of that into a guide, and I've yet to figure that part out. The second I do, it'll be added.
That sounds great. Loma Linda now has a new adolescent fellowship going this year. I've heard they're working diligently on that, and they are beginning to get their first group of questions and go through it. I believe they're going to have a prototype version to release this year. Do you know anything about that?
Oh, yeah. This has been really exciting working with them on this because it's the first time something that I thought of and that I made is now being reproduced in a new way. And it's kind of come full circle because 2007 is when we built the very first guide. And it was a bunch of residents around my kitchen table going through PRITE questions and me typing up new guides to add to it. And the original guide only had like 50 pages of study guide. And it had, maybe a little over 2,000 question material. And that was it. And at this point in time, the guide has 300 pages of study guide to read from and 300 pages of questions that we've had to break them into 2 books because you can't fit it in one book. And getting to see it grow, getting to see residents helping me make content when I'm like, I can't do stats, I need help with this. I can't do genes, I need help with this. It's been cool to have residents come in that I trust that can build amazing content and help me become content editors. And so now to have a child and adolescent version of the PRITE, I've wanted this forever. And we didn't have a fellowship, and so there weren't fellows here to work on that, and it's just not an area that I know very much about. And so helping them to get it off the ground, being able to show them this is what we did in 2007, get your house, get a bunch of really good Thai food, hang out around a table, and make sure that you guys are all there together learning through the PRITE. Get the PRITE out and start looking at where are the questions going, and can you categorize the types of content and information that's important for your fellowship, and you get to learn together. And the process is great because then as you're actually going through your clinical rotations, you're like, oh, that was on the PRITE. This is a relevant thing that I need to be learning. And watching them build this guide's been great because it's something that's new. It's something that there's a need for educationally, and it's something that is uniquely our own. And so the Ninja's Guide to the Child and Adolescent Psychiatry PRITE exam is in the making, and now it's just about having our fellows and our attendings that are child and adolescent experts be able to start writing guides to supplement it, because part of what makes a good PRITE guide is not just questions and answers and summary of topics, but really is looking at those study guides and how can we get the learner engaged and passionate about the same topics that we are.
It seems that in creating the Ninja Guide, you have developed another kind of publication. Like, it's not something that's an article in a journal. It's something that comes out of you and your passion. It's something that keeps you sharper year to year as you work on sections of it or serve as the general editor of it. What lessons have you learned in developing the Ninja Guide from your own experience that might be a lesson for residents about how we develop ourselves?
I definitely think lifelong learning is incredibly important. And I also think that collaboration, sharing of data, being able to put out something like this and making it free, making it be something that a person doesn't have to pay to download. All you have to do is go to the site and you can get a copy of it that you can print up and use yourself, and being able to share information, to be able to share work that we're doing, and to be able to potentially even collaborate between programs on adding new materials, adding new content, I think is really exciting so that we can all become lifelong learners as part of the same community. I mean, every year we put the guide out. It's on ninjaprite.com. We bought the domain, and it actually just links right to our residency site, which is cool. And people get on and we'll download it. We track the downloads, and we have over 20,000 people each year will download the guide in over 40 countries. And so getting to see somebody from Qatar has downloaded the guide and is reading it is just mind-blowing to me, is really, really exciting to be part of a larger academic community and getting to see other people be excited about what we're making and we're doing, and more wanting to see what other people are making and are doing to expand my own knowledge that way.
I know the Ninja Guide is making a huge impact because, as I said earlier, everywhere I go to a conference, other residents ask me about it. They ask other Loma Linda residents about it. And so your guide has grown tremendously, exponentially beyond, I think, your original vision, and is now helping residents and probably even practitioners all over the world. Thank you so much for your work. And is it available now?
Yes, the brand new version, 2019 version, has just gone live.
All right. Well, you can go to the link. We'll put it in the show notes. And thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Thank you, Dr. Perot.
Best of ninja luck.
What identifies CYP? We did it!